When was the last time somebody stopped your production line and you thanked them for it? Most people will tell you that they want you to speak up and pull that cord or hit that button to stop the line. But once that happens, and it turns out to be nothing, all of a sudden it could be looked at as the wrong call. And that one word raises the bar so high that nobody pulls it again. So the line keeps on running, and we half see this problem. And then you find out that you've got scrap. Well, I'm Trevor Blondeel. After spending 25 years in manufacturing, I sometimes have been the guy standing too close to see it. And today, Dr. Michael Gillespie is going to show you 3 ways to get far enough back to think clearly. And a special shout out to David Marquet, who wrote Turn the Ship Around, and lots of work on that. And he introduced me to Michael. And let's get to the show. Well, welcome to the show. And I got permission before I could call you Mike. And
yes, absolutely.
Currently, you're a psychologist at the University of South Florida. And now the listeners are going to know co-author of Distancing with David Marquet. So yeah, welcome, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Trevor. Glad to be here. Always, happy to talk about the book and other things related to organizational psychology. I'm a geek about it and happy to be here. So great.
Yeah, you see a book and then you see these authors on the front cover, and then you wonder, like, what are they like or behind the scenes? And I feel like you could work in manufacturing, Mike. Like you're relatable, but you have like this knowledge, like you've been on the manufacturing floor a lot, because it's almost like when I read your book, it's like, oh, he sees me, I see these problems. And, for the listeners here today, we talk about pulling this andon cord, right? And that started with
Right.
Toyota. And then so when I find that in your book, it's like, oh, yeah, that's what we struggle with, right? It's pulling out the cord. But I think a lot of your premises is that in manufacturing, the drumbeat never stops, and we just got to keep going. And you talk about the pause.
Right. Yeah. And that's a huge issue. And I'm glad you picked on, I mean, we love the andon cord example, David and I, and that was a fun part to write in the book. And you're right. We were very much envisioning, what it's like to, be in a manufacturing environment, what it's like to actually have to stop work because you think something might not be quite correct. And you're right. It's we need to normalize that, and to be, because ultimately we want quality. But if we stifle mistakes or concerns, then we don't get the quality that we want. And so there's ways that we can go about this that work better, and there's ways that we can go about this that work worse. People are probably pretty familiar with some of the examples that work worse. So hopefully there's some ideas in the book that can help.
Yeah. And so you understand our context is that, like, supervisors and team leaders, it just gets stacked with more responsibilities. But the
Right.
subject matter expert is the operator. And then, like, what is this psychology behind the fact that, when we're in that leadership position, when we get under pressure, it's almost like we need to be more controlling, right?
Right.
Where like we need to push that line, keep it going, just get the operator to keep, the cycle going. And it's like, it's okay. Yeah, we're a little bit off. Why is that?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, right. And that's exactly it. So when we're under pressure and stress like that, our attention narrows, our aperture narrows. We focus on just what is the one goal that we're trying to do. And sometimes that's adaptive. Sometimes it's maladaptive. And so oftentimes when we're in that stressful environment, when we're just focused on getting something done, just getting it produced, well, sometimes we lose sight of the bigger picture. And that is natural. It happens to everybody. When we feel that stress, our attention narrows. And so it's important to be aware of that. It's important to be aware that that's a natural human thing to do. It's important to be able to notice when it's happening to us. And then the thing that I think is most relevant that does draw from the book is we need a playbook that we can use when we notice that happening to us, and maybe even if we notice it happening to somebody else. Because if we wait until we're in the moment, like, oh, I'm all stressed out, I really got to get this done, I'm kind of vaguely aware that my attention could be narrowing, but I can't be bothered to deal with that right now. I just got to get this done. Right. Right.
That's it. That's
right.
us.
So we have to have a way that we normalize, but the way we talk about it in the book is normalizing calling a pause. And so it's working with the people on my team to be like, hey, if something seems not quite right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say. This is what I want from you. If you see something not right, I want to hear about it. And then this is what you can expect from me in response. And so, I'm not a huge fan of role playing and play acting. It just kind of makes me feel a little weird. Maybe it was kind of too much, hard sales training as a kid that I rebelled against. I don't know. But like being able to actually play these things out a little bit and talk about them. So the andon chord gives a physical manifestation of what do we do when we need to stop production to look at something, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be like I like a timeout signal sometimes if something's getting heated because sometimes you don't have a way to get in a word edgewise. It's not the right time. But if you just do a simple timeout, or whatever it is for you, but if there's an understanding, with your team or whoever you're working with, that that's what it means and this is what we do, that helps a lot.
I was working with a plant in Windsor, and we were doing some coaching with the owner and emotional intelligence and just trying to get, better awareness. And the next time I came to the plant, or when they shared with me, they make like a fist, which is like the brain, like slow the brain.
Uh-huh.
And it's like they just did that if the situation kind of got heated, to say, okay, we need to take a pause here. And I thought,
I
that,
love that.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and personally, I'm kind of the research guy. I can't give you a research citation for this, but I love the nonverbal cues like that because if we have to wait for the right time or the right way to say the verbal cue, sometimes there can be a delay. We can't parallel process, too many verbal cues, auditory cues all at once. But if we have a signal that we can use, such as the fist, the closed fist to represent the mind, it kind of looks like a brain or whatever, or the T for the timeout. That can be done in parallel. People can recognize it clearly, and we know what it means.
Yeah, it's needed, and I like to say the leader with, if you're a plant manager, you're as good as your managers, right? The managers are going to make you better. Those are because you can't see it yourself. And I also want to say, I don't know how you guys came up with just the title, distancing. Anybody that can give a one-word title and already give me some advice on what to do with one word, that's a good title.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. We wrestled with some other possible titles like, be your own coach, for example, which gets at this idea of becoming somebody else. So there's three tools in the book: be someone else, be somewhere else, be sometime else. So the idea of being your own coach, you becoming that coach, is another way that we thought about it. But our publisher really liked the idea of distancing and owning that space, and it maps on really well to the psychological literature on the topic, psychological distancing, and we can apply that in organizations. And so it has that match, but it also hasn't been saturated out there in the market. And so we can make that point that, hey, yeah, so distancing, that's what we need, distance sometimes. Thanks for appreciating that. I hadn't thought about it exactly that way.
Yeah, because I'm, coming up with, I've got my my title, Manufacturing Greatness. And one of the problems on the book cover is just trying to figure out how to lay all that out. But I liked how you
Right.
kind of broke it out, the distancing, like almost broke up the words. It's like it's a good cover, it's a good title, and for manufacturing team leadership, it's just it's not natural for us. We're kind of programmed
Right.
to do something different. So even I had something a little stressful going on last night, and so I'm walking around and I got the grill going, and I just kind of said, "Okay, what's Trevor doing here?" And
Haha.
and
Yep.
and I don't. This is not. So for the listeners, this isn't something I normally do, but it's like, okay, because I was thinking about interviewing you, and that's one of the tips that you give, and I did find it a little bit different. Okay, Trevor, what are you doing here? Why? What are you worried about? Like, let's kind of walk through this. And I did. It was kind of a little bit different. So that's some of the advice you give in the book.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so there's simple linguistic tools that we can use to get out of our own head, is the way I think about it. How do we get out of our own head to make better decisions, to engage more in critical thinking? Like, what do we do? Because, part of so we end up kind of walking through life in autopilot a lot, which is adaptive. I mean, if you had to actually think about, okay, I'm going to put my left foot here and then my right foot there. And then, okay, then the third step, that's going to be my left foot again. The fourth step, okay, that's going to be my right foot again. I mean, we would drive ourselves crazy. We have to automate some of these things. And so the question becomes, where do we draw the line in that automation so that we can engage the more careful, deliberate thinking when it's needed? And I can see this as being fully relevant on the assembly line. I mean, if I'm working on a project or production line, if I'm working on a project, I probably have fairly automated what I am supposed to do. But
Oh
then
yeah.
what am I looking for that's going to be a signal that tells me, hey, I need to break out of this automated mode, take a step back and look at it. Yeah, my mind's tempted to go in a lot of different directions from there. there's a really important fundamental point I want to back up into though. And then Trevor, maybe you can help, reorient me and get us back
That's
on
my
track.
job. I'm the host.
All right, great. Awesome. Awesome. So the thing I want to mention with all of this too, so we can have the best tools in the world. If it's just me, like in working in my own office or in my own home, all I need to be concerned about is me and engaging the right tool for, making a better decision or whatever. But if I'm working with other people, I'm part of a larger culture of how things are done around here. And so it's critical. We can have the best tool in the world. You can have the most beautiful, elegant andon cord or hand signal, or there's David has cards that he can hand out that you can use, like yellow cards and other different cards. You can have the best tools available, but if it's not normalized and accepted and valued, it's not going to work. But there's a very important underlying concept here, which is it has to be acceptable to call a pause. And so if somebody stops production and then they're the asshole because they stopped production, what are they going to do? They're not going to stop it next time. And
Right.
so because it's easier to let the quality defect, go through, and then it'll show further on down. They won't be the person, who got hassled over it. And so it has to be embraced and accepted. And so there's great research by Amy Edmondson and psychological safety. Some of the listeners are probably already familiar with this. And so she found a fascinating thing where the higher performing hospital units reported more errors. Well, that's weird. Why would that be? Well, the explanation was because it was actually safe to acknowledge the errors. It wasn't that the higher performing units were the ones making the most errors. Is that the higher performing units were the ones that were embracing and owning, acknowledging, fixing the most errors. And so that has to be part of the culture. It has to be welcome. And so that's the value and kind of feeding forward. Okay, this is what it's going to look like if we need to pause the action. And by the way, pausing the action is critically important. We might feel as though we don't want to because we want to meet our targets. Okay, well, that's well and good, but it's more important to do it right or to have a quality product. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe somebody wants to just kind of produce enough crap, and that's okay. I don't know if I can help. I'm probably not the guy to help with that, but that's okay.
They're not manufacturing greatness, Mike. I can tell you that.
That's right. That's not what's being manufactured then.
No, but it is. It's not that it's not out there, right? I mean, that's why. I mean, when we look at, we just did an international research on manufacturing, right? Trying to figure out what's the state of manufacturing when people are looking at it, and one of the stats when they said, what would affect your decision to leave a manufacturing plant, and they put toxic work environment above unsafe conditions, right? And so I mean, we're talking physical safety, but what resonates in what you're saying is it's such a good study with the hospital, right? Like that is so you just got me thinking, maybe before my edits are done, maybe I need to put that research in the book, because near misses, that's what we really want to see more of. And when we see a lot of near misses, that's good because we know that we're reporting, we're pausing, and we're even just stopping to acknowledge and distancing for a minute of like, okay, I stopped, the fork truck was coming, but let's just write this down, right? Because if I did it, maybe someone else didn't do it. So when you talk about the hospital reporting, it resonates with us.
For sure. And near misses are fantastic because they're loaded with information and nothing catastrophic happened. And so those are fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we start, then when the decision-making in manufacturing starts going towards, okay, what, we are documenting this, we are pausing this. That's how leaders are going to make better decisions when we allow ourselves to do that. So some of I kind of got to break these down, but like each one of I don't know what you call it, your framework, but I just call it, be in a different place, be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one other one?
A different time.
Different time.
Right.
Yeah. So I like the be a different person. So,
so be someone else, be somewhere else, be sometime else. Yeah.
So let's go down through each of those for a manufacturer, what that looks like. Because I like about it is that you read a book like this, you can't remember everything.
Right.
But already I'm remembering like, okay, what would I be thinking in a different time?
Right.
What would so-and-so do in these situations?
Right. Absolutely. And if there's one thing that I would have people remember from the book, because sometimes that's all we can ask. Maybe three, but let's just keep it simple. One, be someone else. And so let me unpack that just a little bit, because maybe it sounds a little weird. Well, what do you mean be someone else? And so we have this innate ability to relocate our mind wherever we want to. And so our default lens is, through our own eyeball, through our own eyeballs. It's I, me, my, it's everything is me here and now. That's our frame of reference by default most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we can also, manipulate that. So I can say, okay, instead of seeing this through my own eyes, what would my boss see if he were looking at this? And in one of the stories David likes to tell, and it's in the book, is he talks about how he would have sailors come up to him and ask him what to do or have an idea that made a lot of sense for that particular sailor, but not for the whole submarine and not for everybody else. And so he would ask them, well, what kind of questions do you think I would have to ask? Or what do you think I would say? And he would actually have them sit in his seat. He would go get a cup of coffee and come back.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
I
ask them.
like
And,
that.
and they would have come up with something that actually made sense from his perspective, that was in the best interest of everybody and not just their own kind of, more myopic point of view is the way I hear the story. It's normal. It's natural. But so just kind of taking on that perspective of somebody else can really be helpful. And we've all heard of putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes. Of course, we can do that when it's a kind of a one-on-one relational kind of thing. We want to understand where somebody else is coming from. But we can also, there's other versions we can use. I can become my 10-year from now future self, and that would be sometime else.
I
I
got more.
can,
I got more
yeah,
questions on that one.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I want to give an example here and get your thoughts on this. So this is real life situation. If you're listening to this and you're on your way to work this morning and you're in operations, this is probably going to happen at some point. But we go to the line, there's a problem. You got the production manager there trying to get the line going. You got the quality manager making sure there's good parts. You got the materials manager who's got the customer calling trying to get it out. You got the well tech concerned about the weld. You got the maintenance tech concerned about the equipment. And I never actually did this. I mean, I facilitate a lot of conversations. But what your work got me thinking is like, okay, if we're arguing, it's like, okay, if I'm the production manager for a minute, let's just take a minute.
right,
What's your argument if you were the quality manager? If you're starting to think about how you can distance yourself and ask better questions, what you can do right now is go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. You're going to get some 10 questions to get you thinking, get other people thinking, and hear more about our upcoming research. Let's get back to the show.
right,
And it's
right,
like, that's where I'm thinking, like, is that something that you've seen done? Is that, because we have these silos, right? We get like, and I did it. I was one of those people, right? Because it was kind of like, don't worry about that department. Like, we got to worry about my department.
right.
And it's like, and I was wrong, Mike.
I know. Yeah, and it's so common, and it's easy to be incentivized for that kind of wrong thinking, because if you're the quality control person, well, you're probably mostly reinforced on the basis of the quality, where maybe there's other things that are also important. And so that's where it's really helpful to connect everybody to the greater purpose, the greater vision, the greater strategy, so that they know what they're trying to accomplish in the bigger picture. Because then when you ask somebody to put on somebody else's hat, they're more able to do that. And it's, again, kind of going back to how we normally walk through life. If we have to be painstakingly analytical about every move that we make, it just becomes too much. Decisions take too long. Um, where we end up, fussing over details that we didn't really need to fuss over. But again, then, where do we draw that line? And where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so we have kind of this normal default associative way of thinking, and when we're just kind of walking through life, what am I bringing to bear on the problem that I see? Well, I'm bringing to bear my past experiences. I'm bringing to bear my past successes, failures, hopes, fears, dreams. My ego might be involved. I might be thinking about the most recent event that actually just happened. Okay, so these things might be useful pieces of information, but they're a limited subset of the perspective that we need. And so what happens when we step out of our own head is we drop a lot of these associations, the system one thinking, this fast, intuitive, associative thinking that's based on our experience. And instead, we can shift into system two, which is more of an analytical mode, where now we can apply a careful, thoughtful, critical thinking process to a problem and set our own experiences and biases, assumptions aside. So
Oh,
that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get out of our own head to set aside those biases and assumptions so we can see the situation more objectively.
that sounds great. And man, is that ever hard?
It
You
sure
know,
is.
but like
Sure is.
that's why it needs to be reinforced because if we want to understand how leaders make better decisions, it's not because they're pushing their own beliefs more, right? And sometimes I was taught that in manufacturing, right? Like you just
Right.
gotta drive, right? Like you just
I
gotta be there.
know.
You gotta be loud and
Right.
like really? Like I don't know because there's no books being really written about that, you know?
Right.
They're writing about like pausing, taking a step back, getting other perspectives. So what do I do, Mike, when someone says to me, "Yeah, but Trevor, if you start doing that, no decisions are going to get made. It's just a bureaucracy, and then things happen too slow." And I'm like, "What?" I said, You're missing it." And how do I explain that to someone?
Well, how fast
You
is
know,
it
when they're
when something goes wrong and you have to go back and redo it? Yeah, I mean, so part of it is it's the opportunity cost. And so if we rush through this process and we get it done and we did it wrong, or we built the wrong product, or we missed the market change, but and now you have bigger problems to deal with. And so
hmm
do we want to be able to execute quickly and efficiently? Absolutely. But we also need to be able to recognize when we need to take a step back and apply a more thoughtful perspective to the situation. So it reminds me of, we mentioned this briefly in the book. I'm talking a little bit already about, fast and slow thinking, system one, system two thinking. So Daniel Kahneman, Nobel laureate, most people are familiar with him already at this point. He wrote this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And so he's spent decades, his whole career, researching how people are biased, how we can try to shed those biases and make better decisions. How we can think more rationally. And so I read through the book, great book, by the way. I'm getting toward the end and I'm reading his conclusion. And he's like, despite my decades of experience on this, I'm not sure I'm any better at recognizing or eliminating my own biases than I was when I started. I thought, holy crap. Well, what did I just read this book for? And how depressing, because you've spent your career on this and you're not even sure you're any better at it. Okay. But then I keep reading. It's like, and he's like, well, I think he's like, but what I do think can make a difference is recognizing the situations, the environments where these biases are most likely to be activated. And so it's recognizing the situations that are most likely to lead to this type of derailed thought, this narrow way of thinking, our biased thinking, the shortcuts that we're going to take. And so one of the biggest predictors of of that situation is when everything is super stressful and we have a deadline that we all have to hit. Does that mean we need to move quickly? Yes. But we also need to be able to take a step back and make sure that we're doing the right things in the right ways. And so just making sure that we can recognize the situations that are most likely to activate all these biases. Then we have some tools to shed those biases.
So it's almost like I like what you said there, deadline, because we like to work around deadlines, but like
Right.
it's so for the skeptic, that's like, well, we just got to keep going. Like it's like, well, how about if we just take 30 minutes? Let's get the different ideas from the different departments. Like, what could we be missing?
Right.
Pull on a few people so that we're not and it's not delaying the decision. It's critical thinking, right?
Absolutely.
And we can't do that in 60 seconds with two people.
Right.
Right. Like
Right.
we need the other department's thoughts. So maybe that's just the whole, how we almost negotiate with the current culture, right? Because,
Right.
a lot of the current culture is just, you get rewarded for the faster you go, right?
Right. Right.
But okay, which leads me to the next one, which is, think of it from a different point in time. But like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as simple as that when I read your material, because even how you look at time, because the common saying is, your future self.
Right.
But you have some specific techniques on how to do that exactly.
Yes, absolutely. And so let me start with kind of a visual representation of this. And so imagine in front of you, there's a coffee table, and on that coffee table, there is a candle and a pencil holder, and they're side by side. Now, we want to manipulate the situation so that instead of the candle and the pencil holder being side by side, we want the candle in front. So how do you do that? My my guess is about 90% of people listening, at least, are mentally imagining moving or rotating that candle in front of the pencil holder.
Mhm.
And so that's the object rotation. I'm moving the objects. The other way of thinking about it would be the viewer rotation. So now instead of thinking about moving the candle holder, think about moving yourself around the room so that you see it from the vantage that now the candle is in front of the pencil holder. And so now instead of rotating those objects, I'm actually physically relocating where my mind is in my mind's eye so that I see it from a different perspective. It takes a little bit more effort, but it makes a
Mhm.
difference. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to move our mind. We're not trying to move the object. And so the easy way, and it's not bad, it's not necessarily wrong, but the easy way to use the time distancing, the temporal distancing, would be to say, okay, what am I going to want? What's in my best interest 6 months from now? What's in my best interest 10 years from now? We're used to thinking like that. It's not,
Right.
and it's not bad, but it's more powerful if instead we say, okay, I am my 10-year older self. I am myself 6 months from now. Feel what that feels like. Root yourself in that. What's important to you? What's important to you now? And then look back to, what was the current time and say, what do I wish that version of me would have done then?
I like that. Here's where I immediately connected because I've been in this situation. It's close to month end. We've got a budget. And it's like after I read your chapter on that, I was like, okay, how would I do that? I would say it's year end
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting in the boardroom
Right.
and I'm looking back at July's budget and I went over
Mm-hmm.
and August is great, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, like I went against the grain so I could be sitting here with hitting budget for the year because of what I did in July. And that's really hard, but because that's where we could, how many parts do we make this hour? How many do we make this shift this week, this month, and then this year? But it's like we make decisions to get through the hour and the shift. And especially with these budgets. So I think that's another just a powerful technique of saying, okay, everybody, we are now at year end. Are we happy with our decision today? Is
Right.
that kind of what we're looking at, Mike?
That's it. That's it. Yes, that's exactly it. Yep. Yep.
Whew, yeah, that can be that can take us for a listener right now because it doesn't matter what your position is, but maybe you can just kind of ask that question, right? Maybe just kind of go through the scenario today because I always look at for the listeners like what can I do today, right? So maybe there's some decision that we're making more of a short term, and you can read Mike's book and or you can just take this technique right now and try it out, just for
Right.
better decision making.
Right. Yeah. And there's what I find so interesting. In the next book, if I were to write another book, it would be applying some of these principles at the organizational level, or what happens, now that we're considering people as a collective, and we have different levels of analysis, and how do we, how are we going to approach it, not just from the perspective of an individual person or employee, but how do we approach it now at the organizational level? And one of the things that happens there is the incentive systems have to make sense for using these
Uh,
principles also. So if everybody gets their bonus or not based on short-term objectives, well, why stop to put themselves in a long-term perspective? It's going against the grain. It's going to be unnatural. But if these incentive systems also allow for more long-term effectiveness in addition to, short-term production, well, then now there's a reason. Now it's actually rewarded to think more long-term. And so, sometimes we can have the wrong systems to encourage the behavior that we want. We have to revisit those systems.
we do. We need to revisit a lot of systems because the one I like to use is structure drives behavior, drives results.
Right.
And it is so true. So if the behavior isn't what you want to see, then maybe we need to look at like what's our reward system.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yes, it's easy to point fingers at people, but oftentimes the problem is the system.
Yeah, and I think knowing like do we, because manufacturing we do love systems, we really do, right? Like we like
Yeah.
repeatable processes and we like a lot of that. So it's kind of like, hey, where have we built this in to do that?
Right. And there's the manufacturing system, but there's also the people system. Like how are we treating the people?
And how do we look at each other? That's another thing that made me think reading your material is, and this hits me too, because I talk a lot about intentions versus perceptions. So much that the
Yeah,
only two words I have here. And I think what you said was along the lines that, when I make a decision or when I make a mistake, because we talk a lot
right,
about performance issues, it's like, yeah, but hold on, Mike, this is what happened, but this is what I intended. And
right,
we judge the situation based on our intentions. And when you said, it's when we look at other people, we look at their behaviors, and it was like,
right.
my gosh, he gets us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We judge or exonerate ourselves based on our intentions and these, inner machinations of the mind and what we think we were trying to do. And then we're really actually a good person, or we had but we were just having a tough day or whatever. But we don't have access to that when we're looking at other people. So, and what do we have access to? Just their overt behavior. And so we judge other people on the basis of their behavior, but we judge ourselves based on our intentions. And so there's this built-in asymmetry to how we're seeing the situation. And so that's
Mm,
another thing that getting outside of your own head, helps with, is I can look at myself and be like, oh, well, if I just look at the behavior, and I've done this before, but in some tough, with some tough situations, be like, okay, well, I think this about myself. Well, why do I think that? Let me step outside and take an outside look. And if I'm only looking at my behavior, now I see the problem. And it happens just like that. Like I literally, type of conversation with myself.
I was thrilled to read that, right? Because it was framed a different way than I think about it.
Mhm.
But like, I think I know that your book's very important for manufacturing because we need different avenues because people will respond to material in different ways.
Right.
Like the core message of my book is results come from deeper conversations. And
Okay.
and you provide data around that, right?
Yeah.
Psychology around the fact of we need deeper conversations because we have and the whole thing is the spirit of curiosity, right? Like, okay, so I see the behavior, but I wonder what's driving that behavior. I'm gonna need to ask more questions.
Right.
That's gotta come from the top. So I think this is why I was so excited to talk to you today.
Awesome. Yeah, yes, it's a great fit. Great fit. Love it.
Okay. Well, so, for years, and if you're a past client of mine from maybe 10 years ago, you remember me showing these cartoons of this guy in a submarine of not telling people what to do, which is another premises in my book. So that was David Marquet, turned the ship around. And so as I follow him, and then now I got to know you, Mike, through distancing, and you co-authored that book. So I have a book report that's on the website, and now you guys know, but if you want to go deeper into this, share with your teams, please do that because I study this all the time. And I got really excited and inspired by reading this. How else can the listeners follow you or David, and how did they keep going from here, Mike?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, David is easy to find. I'm online, David Marquet. It's spelled like Marquette, but it's pronounced Marquet. And you can find his stuff on there. He's got great stuff. I am I'm a associate professor of organizational psychology at USF, University of South Florida. So you can find me there. I'm also at michaelagillespie.net is my personal domain. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easy enough to find, easy enough to Google. I enjoy these kinds of conversations because, I do what I do because this is my way to try to help make the world a better place. I decided not to go into clinical or counseling psychology, but instead try to help organizations because we spend so much of our time at work, thinking about
Right?
work. So if we can make a difference there, we're making a huge impact in people's lives.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, I'm always happy to keep these conversations going.
Well, when people think about you, Michael, what do you want them to be thinking about walking into the plan today? What's the one?
So I have we didn't talk about this. I have a simple exercise people can do.
Ooh.
And so I don't know how many people journal. I do sometimes. Just think about a challenge or an opportunity that you have. It can be personal, it can be work related, and journal about it.
Mm,
And here's my prediction. When you start journaling, you're going to be writing with I, me, or my. That's going to be your default. If you have other pages and you flip back, you're probably going to see that. The twist here would be to start to try journaling about your problem or opportunity in the third person. So Mike is trying to decide whether to move. Mike is trying to decide which paper to prioritize next. And it sounds a little cheesy, but it actually works. If you just immerse yourself, get out of the self-immersed perspective and take on the self-distance perspective by using this third person language, you can feel a difference in your mind and you can see yourself more dispassionately, maybe with more empathy, maybe with more accountability, and certainly with more perspective.
I was doing it verbally, but I haven't switched to the journaling part, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to try that because, I believe you. And a lot of times it's the cheesy stuff that we don't want to do, even though it's simple and it works. It's like
It,
you talked about role playing earlier. I know when I say it, but man, I have learned so much through role playing because,
right?
it just works. And
It does. It
and if we
does.
can get past the fact that it makes us feel cheesy, but it works, then who cares? So, yeah,
Right.
so try it out.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions, Mike, and thanks for taking your time to connect with the manufacturing world today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Trevor. It's been fun.
But thanks so much for spending time with Mike and I today. Try that journaling in your own name and let me know how that goes. And if you want to do one other action this week, go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. Not only are you to get more information from people like Mike, but you're going to get the state of manufacturing research. We're going to be slowly releasing that information, as well as you'll get that through our newsletter, and you'll get 10 questions you can start asking to distance yourself from the problem and get those long-term results that we're all looking for. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Stay curious.